This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first, call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee with your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 an order. Additional terms apply.
We acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hello there and welcome back to another episode of This Song Is Yours. I'm your host Simon Fink, and today we have a very special guest with us. Well, in my eyes anyway, our guest today is the frontman of one of my favourite bands. It's Colin Meloy from the Decemberists. The much-loved indie rock band from Portland, Oregon, have been delighting audiences for 20 years with their literary take on indie and folk rock, and their discography includes critically acclaimed albums such as The Crane Wife and The Hazards of Love. Last week, they released their brilliant 9th studio record, their first double album, which is titled As It Ever Was, So It Will Be Again. In today's episode, we were lucky enough to speak with frontman Colin Meloy about this new record. We discuss the distinctive sound of this record, which combines elements of all previous Decemberists albums. We talk about the unique quarters of this double record and how some areas of it sound completely different from others. We also delve into Colin's introduction to songwriting and the birth of the band. Plus, we probe Colin about when we might see them in Australia next. We want to thank Jo for her help with today's episode and remind people to subscribe to this very podcast. You can find all details for the band on where you can purchase their record and find them on tour, and all of our details within today's show notes. So let's jump into it. Here is our conversation with Colin Meloy from the Decemberists.
Where do you think that the money comes from? Do you think it just naturally grows? And it's so, no, we lurk at the end of the road.
Please welcome to This Song Is Yours, Colin Meloy from the Decemberists. Colin, hello. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
My absolute pleasure. Longtime fan of the Decemberists, so it is really exciting that we get to have a chat with you today about the brand new record from the band. It is called As It Ever Was, So It Will Be Again. Firstly, congratulations on this this stunning record. How are you feeling with the songs being out now? I believe your time, it might still be coming out, but in Australia,
you're in tomorrow. You're in the future.
Exactly.
I'm excited. I mean, it's always exciting to have a record come out. Release day is always kind of tends to be a momentous occasion. It's been 6 years or whatever since we had a record come out. This being our 9th record, we're not strangers to that experience, but it's always a blast when it does happen.
100%. I was going to mention that, as you've just said, it's the 9th record in a just over 20-year history of the band. I think 22 sitting at now.
23 years, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Is there...
23.
Is there, I imagine that there is still a level of excitement. Do nerves or not fear, but yeah, I guess, is there any anxious or any nervousness still around putting records out?
No, I mean, you hope to not be, ridiculed and destroyed. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's less of a concern for me now. Like, I think early on in our career, every record, as you're kind of moving up the ladder, becoming more visible, it just sets you up. I feel like right around 2009, 2010, 2000, like that period, that was where I feel like we were putting out records and you just never knew. And I think because you were so visible and because there's enough people writing about you and watching your career that everybody had an opinion. I guess I don't care so much now. I'm a little bit more at peace with that. That was hard then, coming out of the indie world where everybody kind of was allowed to do their own thing. And I think once we had signed to a major label and once we were, selling out big places and stuff like that, inevitably, I think the critics came for us. So that was always a bummer. I think that was a bummer when that first started happening, but now I really just don't care.
Very fair. And I think as well, and look, I can't speak to it, but I imagine as well with age, there's an element of letting go that kind of is that you're more content with what you're putting out than the thoughts of what other people kind of think of it in a way.
Yeah. And also like my ambition, like I feel like we've achieved something. I'm not so worried about how this will go over, whether or not how it will chart, those kind of concerns more had to do with sort of the ascent, like when we were kind of on the ascent in our career. I also, I'm also keenly aware, like having put out this many records into the world, how quickly it fades, how you can spend so much. And it's like with any creative pursuit, it's the same with books. You spend so much time crafting the thing, then you just throw it out into the world that is this massive ocean of other people doing the same thing. And it's just inevitable that, it's just, it kind of it will disappear probably more quickly than I can imagine. And that's something else I need to be at peace with.
I think I would agree. In today's culture, there is an element of that you put it out into the world and it resonates with who it resonates with and it doesn't, and it kind of makes that decision quickly. I feel like with this brand new record, however, it's going to delight quite a lot of fans of the Decemberists. It seems to be almost sonically like, I want to say it's almost like a best of with a whole bunch of brand new songs almost. Like it seems to be little touchstones of previous records of the Decemberists. Curious for you, when you go into making a new record, is there ever a revisiting of what you've previously done, sitting down and listening to those records, or is that just kind of ingrained in the DNA of you anyway?
No, I can't. I can't listen to my other records. It's always the case where each record, I become so intimate with it, and I'm listening to the songs, the demos of the songs over and over again, listening to rough mixes in the studio, and then listening to mixes and listening to masters and by the time that I'm done with that process, I am just absolutely tapped out and could not bring myself to listen to the record again. So I'll go back occasionally and just kind of, pop around, listen to like a few songs here and there, but for the most part, I don't. I probably should do more. Just you know better how not to repeat yourself. But we play all these songs. So many of the songs. There's only a few songs that we don't play live. So I know them better from their live version than from their album version.
That's also very fair. Very good point. Obviously, there's a revisiting in the live arena for a number of those songs. For this record, it is a sprawling double album, which is very impressive, something that the Decemberists haven't done before, and kind of has its own distinctive feel across the record in terms of almost being broken up into quarters. I think that the first kind of 4, 8, 12 tracks have their own distinct feel. And then obviously there is, for those who haven't listened to the record, we'll make sure we put the links on where you can listen to it and purchase it in today's show notes. But Joan in the Garden is almost like its own quarter at the end of the record as like a 19-minute song, which is, again, very impressive. Was that the intention when you went into the studio with Tucker to kind of, have these very distinct, different parts of a double album?
No, I mean, it's something that started occurring to me early on because we had these songs that I really wanted to keep very intimate, and that's the side two, the kind of stripped down, more acoustic numbers. And because I was trying to usually, you know, when you've got a number of quieter numbers, you kind of thread them through the record, and they create their own pattern in the sequence of the record. But I was trying to think of records that have done it where they put them all in one spot, and that seemed interesting to me. And I couldn't really think of ones that did. For whatever reason, I kept flashing on Big Star's number one record, which in my mind, the second side is like all acoustic stuff, but actually doesn't turn out to be true. I think it's just kind of got a different vibe on the second side. And there, you know, there's plenty of records that I think do have thematic sides, and I think that's what we want to try to get at. Once it became clear that we had enough material that we felt was good enough to make it a double record, then I felt like we could really kind of stretch out into that idea of breaking it up into these thematic sides. And I think they broke up pretty easily into those sides. Each one being distinct from the others.
There is, sonically, there's a lot to kind of take in as a fan and as a music listener from this double album. I was hoping you might indulge me a little bit. My favorite track from the record was one that almost surprised me in terms of having been a fan of the band for a number of years. It was one of those acoustic tracks that was the one I found myself returning to time and time again. All I Want Is You is this gorgeous, very straightforward, and not simple track, but in terms of, you know, some of the other tracks on this album where you've got strings, you've got flutes, you've got incredible percussion, this one just kind of cut straight through. I was wondering whether you might be able to talk just about, I guess, either the creation or the inspiration behind this track.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of songs like the very simple, you know, love songs, sentimental, but very sweet, very straightforward, very spare. I feel like it's a neat trick when you're able to pull it off. And I think of, again, going to Big Star for some reason. I'm in Love with a Girl, which I think is that on number one record, or is that Radio City? That like, as when I was a teenager, when I first heard that song, like it just like became the soundtrack to every crush I had. And so I'm kind of aware of the power of those songs, how, you know, where you can really hear the voice. There's no effort on the songwriter's part to really dress the lyrics or the melody into anything kind of trying to break any kind of mold. It's really just trying to be a love song. And that in itself, in that simplicity, I think can be very tricky, because you don't want to fuck with it too much. It just kind of has to be what it is. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I appreciate when people say that, because I feel like I have as much control over how good that song is as like, I feel like other songs I can tinker with them to make them better. That one was just like, this is just what it is. And I feel like it works, and I can only hope that other people agree.
Well, I would. I know I'm only the voice of one man here in Australia, but it definitely resonated with myself.
That's all that matters.
Thank you very much for indulging me with that and allowing me to ask that. We are primarily a songwriting podcast. I was curious whether you might let us know how you got your start in songwriting originally, all the way back whenever it was, how you first found yourself interested in songwriting.
Well, I mean, I don't think I really expected to write songs, even though, like, I, as a kid, loved writing stories and writing plays. When I picked up an instrument and started learning guitar, songwriting seemed really scary and daunting to me. It seemed as a burgeoning fan of music at that time, and I was probably 13 or something like that. I was so enamored of the songwriters that I loved. I just didn't know how they did it. It seemed like a magic trick, and I couldn't imagine how to do it myself. And it just took time. It also took, thankfully I fell in with a kid who was a year older than me, whose dad was actually my guitar teacher. He introduced us when I brought in a New Order song that I wanted him to teach me. And my guitar teacher was like, I think my kid likes this music, and introduced me to David. And he and I came together. He was older. He was much more confident. He was a better musician than I was. He was actually a really great pianist. And he had like a mixing board, and he had, we could record straight through the mixer onto his tape deck. And we played a bunch of covers, and then he just wanted to write songs. We started writing songs together. And thankfully, I think working with somebody else at that very vulnerable age, and somebody who kind of had esteem, really helped me, just get my confidence and just getting verses down on paper, and having someone else be like, yeah, that works. It's kind of weird, but it works. And then that led me to like move out on my own and start exploring writing my own songs. And it became a kind of friendly competition between he and I think, that we would come to each other with our songs. So I think it kind of grew from there.
I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think it is sometimes when you're starting out, and the fact that there is no parameters around it, it can be a little bit scary when I guess there's no one there to be able to support or question or say, no, that is good, or that's like, keep working on it. So I'm glad that you and David found one another in terms of songwriting kind of partners or companions or whatever you want to call it, because I feel like that we're all the luckier for that friendship and what we do have today in terms of the Decemberists. I believe that the band, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're in maybe the second or third week of a tour.
Well, we're home now. We're between two legs of a tour, and we have we have a show tomorrow for the release of the record, and then we go back out in July.
Yes, I believe that there's a number of dates across the US in July with the Rat Boys. Incredibly excited to see how this record is going to be playing out in a live setting. I think that there's a number of tracks that kind of really lend themselves to some fun. Oh No, which is near the start of the record, I think is going to be a very, very kind of fun track to see in a live capacity. For you, is there one that you're currently enjoying playing off this new record live, or that you are looking forward to playing?
Yeah, I mean, Oh No has been fun. It'll be, I think it's better once people are familiar with it, So that has been fun to play. Jonah in the Garden has been a lot of fun to play, just because it is such a project, and it's it's a sort of thing where you really get to focus in on your part. There's lots of challenging moments in it, and a lot of places where you're constantly like, I feel like I can do that better, And then we have this kind of sprawling sound bath in the middle of it, which is, it's always fun to do shit like that on stage.
100%. I was very lucky enough a number of years ago, I think it was 2017, I happened to be in New York with family, and not happened to be, we were going to New York, but I might have asked to change the dates so that we could be there at the time to go to Brooklyn Steel and see the Decemberists. And that night, I think unannounced, I don't think it was planned, but you played Hazards of Love in full, and then like a greatest hits afterwards, which just an incredible night, which I imagine has the same kind of energy of Joan in the Garden, because it's just sprawling soundscapes kind of mixing it up together. And one thing that we've discussed with so many songwriters on this podcast is like there's an element of you want the crowd to be enjoying themselves. That's why you're there. But there's also a level of interest for yourself in keeping you engaged, which I imagine things like that help in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I have this feeling, and there is a kind of a contract between the audience and the performer that we are going to do our level best to make sure that whatever you paid for your ticket, that you're going to feel like that you got your money's worth. And we're not going to try to stump you or freak you out or even though I do think, there's a certain amount of button pushing that needs to be done. But on the flip side of that, that is that I think people coming have to understand that in order to put on a good show, we do need, to a certain degree, do it on our own terms. And I feel like, as with Joan in the Garden, I think that people who have stuck with us for this long, I think we're pretty clear about what we're up to. And I can only hope that something like Joan in the Garden, even if it's like, yeah, I wish they would have played other songs, you'll still go along with it, and it's something that we need to do in order to put it on a good show, I feel like.
100% agree. Well, look, very much looking forward to possibly being able to see these new songs in a live capacity, which kind of does lead me to, might be a bit of an obvious question. At any point in the future, can we maybe expect to see the Decemberists down here in Australia in support of the record?
Yeah, we'd love to. There's some dates on the books, that were floated that didn't quite work out. So we'll be coming back to that. I think we'd like to make it back down there for sure.
Look, even just the planning we'll gladly take at this stage, but I'm very excited for when that does kind of get announced and happen, and we'll make sure that we do post it across all of our podcast socials and things like that.
Cool.
Colin, we would usually ask our guests what they currently are listening to. Is there anything at the moment that's kind of on high rotation for yourself?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I just started listening to this new record that just came out, I think, a couple of weeks ago. But what is it? I'll have to look. I think it's Marina Allen. Are you familiar? You are?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
That new record is I just want to make sure. Yeah, Marina Allen, 8-Pointed Star. Yeah, I really love it. That's what I've been listening to.
How do you usually find your new music? Is it something that are you an algorithm person, or is it a word of mouth, or kind of like friends' recommendations?
Yeah, occasionally friends will recommend stuff. It's mostly just kind of following leads, I think, reading music blogs and things like that, is how I'll end up. But, these days, just letting the Apple Music play after a record, and they just play random songs. It's kind of a pretty extraordinary way to discover new bands that way.
100%. I would agree with that. I think it was the support band for the Two of the Rap Boys. That's actually how I came across their music, through letting something else finish and Apple Music kind of picking up the slack. So yeah. I would agree. Sometimes it works. Colin, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast today. I do appreciate it. And congratulations on As It Ever Was. So it will be again. The record is out right now. We'll make sure that there are links in today's podcast where people can buy the record, see you on tour in the US, and then when those Australian dates materialize, they'll be able to find them there as well. But thank you again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Imagine the softest sheets you've ever felt. Now imagine them getting even softer over time. That's what you'll feel with Bowl and Branch's best-selling signature sheets in 100% organic cotton. In a recent customer survey, 96% replied that Bowl and Branch sheets get softer with every wash. Start getting your best night's sleep in sheets that get softer and softer for years to come. Try their sheets with a 30-night guarantee. Plus, get 15% off your first order at bowlandbranch.com, code BUTTERY. Exclusions apply. See site for details.